My name is Musa Adnan. That's Subboor Ahmad. This is Rerouted, and here's what we have coming up for you today. What's the funniest thing you've come across? Like in all of your what's the funniest, most bizarre thing when you heard this? You were like, what? Where did you come up with this from?
Darwin talking about Hurul Ain.
What?
Yeah, Darwin. When he was younger, he really was fond of some girls who were his obviously his age. He was like a teenager at the time, or
I can't imagine Darwin as a kid, man.
Yeah. Well, he must have been at some point.
You know why? Because all the pictures you see of Darwin, he's got a beard, he's bald.
He's born like that. Now, with atheism, there's an automatic association with Darwin, just automatic. Yeah.
Okay.
And when I started studying evolutionary theory, I realized there was no link. It was the same link. Actually, there was a link, and the link was the same as being part of the collecting stamps club in North Luton and being a serial killer. There's no link.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, bro.
Wa alaikum salam.
How's things, Subboor?
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Can I get a cheeky handshake?
Yeah, you can.
MashaAllah.
Yeah,
You got cold hands.
indeed.
Why did that get so awkward so quickly?
I don't know.
Anyway, mashallah, brothers and sisters, Subboor is a brother I've known for, mashallah, a long time actually. You got to see me at my prime.
Prime? Was that your prime?
Was when I was a young child.
There were primes to come, inshallah. I mean, that was you were a young adult at the time, I guess. Adolescent, what they called them. You were I think when you came in the office, you were 14?
14, 15, yeah. Probably.
How old are you now?
I'm 22.
22. So in 2010, you would have been...
Here's your math skills coming out.
Yeah, you could see how bad they are. Something like 13, yeah.
Yeah, 14, 15,
Yeah.
probably. I don't know. But anyway, alhamdulillah, we've actually travelled abroad together.
Yeah.
We've travelled abroad together. There's a lot of things that you guys don't know about Subboor that by the end of the episode, you're going to find out. Very interesting things. Like what he's studying at uni. I mean, we're going to get into that. But before we do...
I thought you said interesting things, but anyway.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's true. But we actually had the privilege of travelling abroad together.
Yeah.
Where did we go?
We went Malawi.
Malawi,
If you
Africa.
remember. That trip was classic.
It was classic. Was that your first time in Africa?
It was.
mine.
And if you remember, I went to, we met up in Ethiopia.
Yes.
So
did we?
Yeah,
So
no,
we didn't
no. As in we flew together. Me, you, Adnan flew together. But then we met Ali Bishara and another sheikh from Bahrain.
Yes,
we met them in.
I still remember. You know how you have images in your mind? I still remember where we met them in the airport. There was windows. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, subhanallah.
Yeah, so then we met them, and then I bought that weird Ethiopian shirt.
Yeah.
And then I think Adnan or one of them was claiming it's a woman's shirt, and I was wearing. Do you remember?
Was it like a dashiki?
What's that?
Like the colored shirt.
Yeah.
Okay. I like those, man.
Yeah.
I had one. It ripped, but they're very nice to go sleep in. Anyway, continuing on the conversation before we take it somewhere else. We got to Malawi. How did you find Africa? Because that was your first time. That was my first time.
Africa was, you always hear people talking about this thing in Africa, that thing in Africa. The word I would come back with Africa is spiritual. It's a very spiritual place. I mean, when you go there, people are so friendly. Everyone believes in God. You don't have to come across those atheists. It's just like,
It was contrary to a lot of stereotypes on Africa.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, the first stereotype is that Africa is Africa in the sense that there's one monolithic group. They're all the same. When you travel in the same country from one city to another, or one, say, the north to the south, people are different. There's
also this thing be careful, it's very dangerous. And
yeah. I mean, I live in Harlesden, so compared to that, Malawi was really safe.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that happened on the trip was you nearly got drowned.
Yeah, well, I didn't. Drowning would mean, well, someone was trying to kill me. There's a difference. There's a difference.
You're going to find out why we're laughing about this, actually.
Basically, in the trip, you have an Amir.
Yeah.
And so the Amir was Adnan.
Which is my
Now,
dad, yeah.
So with Adnan and me, because we're friends, like long-time friends and stuff, having your friend as your Amir is always going to be problematic, because you're like, bro, what are you doing, man? What's this for? Why do you wake up late? What happened here? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So anyway, one day I was just like really cheesing him off, and I was like, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, how could you do that? Waste of money, blah, 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 blah. Just going off. I don't remember what about, yeah. And then, you know, we were just like fighting each other. We were fighting each other in the bedroom. We'll get to that in a second, where, you know, again, I was tortured, let's put it that way. And another one was the drowning. That, you know,
let's do the tortured first. So because that was before.
All right. So basically, the first torture was because we went on a budget. All of us were sleeping in one room.
Yeah.
And if you remember, it was a double bed where I was sleeping in the middle, and your dad was sleeping on the other side, and you were sleeping in the other side.
So you were basically the toppings in the sandwich.
Already it was uncomfortable. Yeah. No, alhamdulillah, I wasn't very comfortable because I knew you guys, but it was uncomfortable from the perspective that I did loads of things to cheese off Adnan.
Yeah.
And then he would take his revenge when the door was shut, when it's late at night. And if you remember, when the fighting was going on,
Once
somebody came in, they thought someone was getting killed. Do you remember that?
I just remembered. The way he was screaming, yeah, like, is like, I can't even describe it because headphone wearers are gonna go crazy, yeah. But like
a wild pig being sacrificed,
like that, literally. Yeah.
Well, not quite, but
like,
yeah.
well, you know what? Like screams, bro. Yeah. So they came and knocked on our door. They thought like someone's getting abused or something. Yeah. They were like, "What's going on? Is something okay?" Yeah. And we opened the door, and it's Subboor standing. There were 3 guys. Why are these noises coming out of here? But anyway, what ends up happening is my dad was torturing Subboor. So Subboor runs into the toilet for refuge, and he grabs me, and I'm in the toilet with him. He locks the door.
You were the hostage.
He took me hostage, and I'm a kid now. Like, what am I gonna do? You a grown adult. You get. So what happens is, I look around. I'm like, this is one thing my dad does as well. My dad always looks around, you know, to use things.
For weapons.
Yeah, for weapons, for weaponry, yeah. So look around. Obviously, we're talking in a joke sense, yeah. So we look around.
For the benefit of the tape.
Exactly. We look around and there's water. There's like a tap. So I'm like, you know what? I pick up the mug, fill it with hot water, and I'm looking at Subboor. Subboor, I don't think you still knew what I was going to do with that. I threw it on him and he started screaming. Because
it was hot. It was so hot, that water.
And in Malawi, it's hot. Like
a country.
Aslan, like originally, like it's hot in Malawi. But yeah, man, it was so funny. Moving on from that.
And that's just like at the hotel. Then also Adnan tried to drown me at the beach.
Yes, getting to the beach.
Yeah.
It was obviously as a joke. Like, we were just pushing him down. It was really, Lake Malawi was beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Lake Malawi was beautiful.
The place is beautiful, and the thing is that if you remember, we had those hotel rooms which were next to the sea.
Yeah.
And then
the
lake.
Yeah, we stayed there as well.
Yes. And basically, it's like when you look out, like if I was to look out my window, I'd see like a guy, especially knowing Harlesden, some guy might be talking to a lamppost. Yeah, like people are drunk out of their heads. But Malawi, you look out the window, and it's like a lake, and it's like the sun.
It's like you're in like
Jannah, man. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's like that's what you'd think. Yeah. But obviously we can't imagine Jannah. Yeah. Going forward now, subhanallah, Subboor is someone who's been involved in the da'wah for a number of years now, mashallah. You started off on a very, if I can say, basic level, giving da'wah, teaching, etc. Thereafter you chose to pursue education, of course, for the da'wah, for the sake of Allah. What did you choose to study?
Philosophy, in particular philosophy of biology, and I took modules in evolution and human nature.
So the reason I'm laughing is, what on earth triggers a Pakistani? What did your family think of that?
Actually, I don't think a lot of people in my family know yet.
Okay. Good.
Unless they listen to Rerooted, which is the best new podcast starting in 2019.
Come on.
Nice plug. Hopefully, I'm going to get some money after this. So,
no.
You guys are on a budget for that. Okay. Yeah. So, just buy me a cheeseburger afterwards. Okay. So, what was I talking about again?
You going to uni?
Yes. Yeah. So basically, what it was is that, firstly, I liked studying philosophy anyway.
Okay.
Now, before
what is philosophy? Like, break it down for someone.
Okay, so You see, it's hard to define sometimes because that's also a philosophical problem. Like, what's philosophy? Yeah, basically, it's kind of what you imagine. It's just kind of like, okay, let's try and reason about this. Let's try and reason about that. Let's try and find out if this thing is true. What does truth mean? And
is philosophy basically the questioning of an idea?
It's questioning of sometimes how you question.
Okay. So
and so you know, and I think it's important here to sort of clarify that you know, when sometimes Muslims hear philosophy, what do they think? You know, they have this negative perception that oh, it's like,
so is it not negative?
It doesn't have to be. So
okay.
What I would say is that a person who knows their Islamic foundation, they know the Aqidah, they know first principles, they know Islamic understanding of our, you know, epistemology, which is known as the theory of knowledge. So basically, when someone's grounded and they go in, that's different to some guy who's like a spotty teenager, decides to study philosophy and then comes out all confused. So
why does he have to be spotty for?
He's a teenager, acne and all that. You know, you went through that about 2 years ago, right?
I didn't have acne. Never.
Okay, but you know what I mean.
I don't want to say it now.
All the teenager problems. I mean, this podcast can go out to a few thousand people, so I'm sure you don't elaborate on your, that problem.
How can you slap a few thousand people?
Oh yeah, hundreds of thousands.
Inshallah, man. Go on.
You know, at the moment, there's only 2 people in a jinn, but in the future, you know, there's gonna be a lot more people watching this show. But let's get back to why we're studying, right? So with me, I wanted to study philosophy from a perspective of understanding the philosophy of science, understanding evolutionary theory.
Why did you want to understand evolution, philosophy? Why?
So the thing is, when we're giving dawah, right, we're trying to convey the message of Islam. Now, one of the things which used to come up, which came up like a trump card, which came up like a get out of jail card, which is that, evolution. Sometimes people just used to say that. They didn't even bother explaining what they're saying.
Yeah.
Now, I had an interest in evolutionary theory from before I started studying formally. But then I was kind of like, do you know what? This is used as a weapon against God. So it's better for us as Muslims, rather than just hearing about this particular theory, to understand it at a really powerful academic level, so that if somebody asks us, we can at least give them an Islamic perspective. It can't just be like, oh, by the way, there's this video online which is about conspiracy theories and about why evolution's fake or whatever. Yeah. You want to do something that's academically strong. So that's why I wanted to do it.
So you wanted to basically, you done it with the in the effort that it's going to aid you in the da'wah, basically.
Yeah.
A lot of people bring this up. It's an atheistic idea, right?
See, this is the thing, Musa, right? That's what I thought.
People always associate evolution with atheism.
It's kind of like this. You associate Islam with biryani. Yeah.
Okay.
In the UK, at least. I mean, for anybody who's listening in North America, they'll be like, biryani? What's biryani? But anyway, so they're going to think like Islam is linked to curries, or Islam is linked to
a certain dress,
or the dome, or, you know, there's certain things that people are like, this is associated with that. Now, with atheism, there's an automatic association with Darwin. Just automatic, yeah?
Okay.
And when I started studying evolutionary theory, I realized there was no link. It was the same link. Actually, there was a link, and the link was the same as being part of the collecting stamps club in North Luton and being a serial killer. There's like no link. There was like a completely disjointed kind of fields. There was nothing in evolutionary theory that would lead a person to say, do you know what? There's no God. Because this is what's really interesting, Musa, right? Darwin himself said, in my wildest fluctuations, I was never an atheist. And he also said that it would be absurd to think that someone can't be an evolutionist and can't be a theist. He says it's absurd. So this link that they try and make, if you study science, you're going to become an atheist because evolution, that's what it proves. So I realize it's false.
So, bro, I want you to dumb it down for us, okay? Evolution. How would you, as someone who's studying these sort of topics at a high level in university, how would you define evolution for a person who's just heard it? They've probably heard it before, but let's be honest, bro. People hear words all the time, but they don't necessarily always know what it means. I assume if someone was to mention to some Muslims evolution, they just think, oh, we came from monkeys.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
So what's evolution?
So the thing
do we believe in it as well?
Okay, yeah. So we could do that next, right? So the first thing is, I can give a sort of academic understanding of it, but the problem is that when you go to the popular level, it has many different meanings, and even sometimes within academia it's used in the same way it's used at a popular level. So it gets very confusing. But let me just explain it in the way evolution was understood before Darwin.
Okay.
Now, as soon as you hear, wait, hang on a second, I thought Darwin came up with evolution.
Yeah.
When you hear evolution as a concept existed before Darwin, automatically you get this red flags. You're like, well, what's going on here, right? So evolution before Darwin meant that there's biological change over time. And evolution was written about, philosophized about, theorized about for approximately 3,000 years. So it's been a well understood and philosophized idea for a very long time.
Okay.
Darwin came along and he developed something different, which is known as Darwinian evolution.
Okay.
So evolution simply means biological change over time.
What's Darwin's?
So Darwin's is different. So
Okay.
evolution has a very, very basic understanding, which is that biological change over time.
Okay.
That's not theologically dangerous. You know, that's not something which people are going to be like, oh my God, you know, what kind of anti-God idea is this?
Yeah.
Darwinian evolution is a idea that all of life goes back to a single organism, a single beginning, and it's called the tree of life. So from that first cell, all of life, me, you, the camera guy, Lady Gaga, we're all related, right? All human beings, all animals, all elephants, everything. The second idea is that this happened through a natural process known as natural selection. So these are the Darwin's idea. This is Darwin's idea that all of life has one common origin, and two, this happened via this blind mechanical force known as natural selection. Now, what happened was after Darwin, his idea wasn't atheistic.
Okay.
And he in fact wrote himself that I didn't intend to write atheistically. There's nothing that's saying there's no God. People after Darwin turned it into an anti-God idea. And even while he was alive, it was being used as an anti-God idea.
Okay. Okay, so basically, Darwinian evolution puts things in the beginning of time. Is that what the difference is?
It's a history of evolution.
Okay.
It's a particular history of evolution.
Okay.
And it's also that it's like before him,
Yeah.
Darwin, and even after Darwin. In fact, some of Darwin's friends, like Asa Gray, he was a Harvard University professor, I believe. They believed there was this, like, God guiding the process of evolution, right?
Yeah.
Now, Darwin's theory is very mechanical. It's not God, it's natural selection.
Oh, he believes that like it's just nature.
It's
and
just nature,
okay.
right?
So that's why we're the atheists, like.
That's where they hijack that understanding,
and they say we don't need God.
and they say we don't need God, because what Darwin was basically saying was this, right? And he's explicit about this, that you got this natural theory,
Yeah.
but technically somebody could believe that God created the universe and natural forces are operating, and these natural forces lead to this process. So he didn't see it contradicting God, but he didn't also at the same time believe that I need to invoke God. Now, that's a very subtle point, but atheists just hijacked it and said, no, it's an atheistic theory, and they just went wild. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example, right? There's a guy who wrote a review of Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, when it came out. And this guy believed in God. And Darwin's idea conflicted with the idea of biblical creation, of Islam or Islamic creation, that, you know, you have the first man which was created, which is Adam, and that man is not linked to anything else in nature. Yeah. So this this particular theist, he wrote a review of Darwin's Origin of Species, and he said that the idea that God created everything separately, like created tigers separately to whales and whatnot, and humans, and the idea that God created one life which evolved into everything else, which is Darwin's idea, he said both these ideas are just as noble. They're just as noble for God. God can either do this or that. God is still, you know, a majestic creator.
Still God, yeah.
Yeah. Darwin was so impressed by that review of that religious person, he took it and he inserted it in his second edition of The Origin of Species.
No way.
That shows he
wasn't atheistic.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't like this Richard Dawkins type of atheist. In fact, if you pick up Richard Dawkins' 1980s book, The Blind Watchmaker, and at that time I think you were minus 10 years old, right? When that book came out, it was the main popular evolutionary book in the world in terms of popular understanding of evolution, right? A popular science book. In that book, here's what he says. Darwin allowed us to be intellectually satisfied atheists. So even as long ago as 1980s, right?
It was getting misconstrued.
It is getting misconstrued. But funnily enough, and this is really interesting, right, Musa? Before we get into whether we believe it or not, we can cover that near the end. Let's go back to 1927. That's around the time that Adnan was born. So 1927, right? So 1927, you have a book published, which is actually on that shelf, which I'll show you after the show.
Okay.
There's a book published by an atheist, hardcore militant atheist biologist who is also a philosopher. This guy hated religion, hated from the maybe hated a bit of a strong term, but wanted to get rid of religion, that was clear.
Okay.
And he was somebody who wanted to spread atheism and spread evolutionary theory. And he wrote a book called Religion Without Revelation. Religion Without Revelation.
Okay.
Meaning they have something like a system which exists, which doesn't come from God. It's a man-made religion.
Yeah.
And he wanted this man-made religion, which he called evolutionary humanism. He wanted and he predicted that that is the future religion of mankind, not Islam or Christianity, evolutionary humanism. So that's the religion without revelation, evolutionary humanism. His name was Julian Huxley, and he was the first president of UNESCO.
Okay.
United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, right? UNESCO. It's a very powerful position from which he can propagate that propaganda. And his mind, he had a very clear strategy. Bring people to a scientific understanding of the world, bring people to a Darwinian understanding of the world, and they will become atheists. And that was his agenda.
Yeah.
He was a very prominent biologist. In fact, if you Google his name, you'll see how important he was. And he was somebody who was directly, as far as back as 1920s, directly making a link between atheism and evolution, and directly saying this is how we're going to evangelize the world.
Julian Huxley.
Julian Huxley. Yeah. So this whole idea is being hijacked by atheists, and this whole idea has been used as a weapon against religious people when it doesn't. Of course, there's parts of the theory which contradicts Islam.
Interesting.
But it's not in of itself an atheistic theory.
That's some deep stuff right there, bro. That's some really, really deep stuff. So I think the question that many of our Muslim brothers and sisters are wondering, who are listening, maybe some of our non-Muslim friends as well, who are wondering is, does this coincide, or can it coincide with our beliefs as Muslims?
Okay.
Evolution. Do we believe in it as Muslims?
Okay. So we just need to step back a few steps before we answer that question. Anything in science, there may be times that something in a scientific journal or a scientific theory or scientific conclusion, it may contradict Islam, and there may be things which confirm with Islam.
So what do you do then?
Exactly, what do you do? Now, I'm going to give a general point and then we'll home into evolution.
Okay.
Right? A general point is this. We have reasons why we believe the Qur'an is the word of God.
Yes.
We have separate, and you guys are going to do episodes on that, God willing, on this issue, why Qur'an is true, this issue, why the Prophet, peace be upon him, is a true messenger of God. So you have evidence for that.
Yeah.
You, of course, have evidence on the other side too. Now, when you have two pieces of evidence which contradict, they both can't be true. So what we as Muslims believe is that science is a source of knowledge, but at best, it's not going to give you concrete, absolute knowledge. Qur'an is a source of knowledge which we know with certainty is absolute and true. Now, there may be times in which the Qur'an confirms science. There may be times in which the Qur'an contradicts what science is saying. As long as we understand that the reality is God's word and God's world, which science tries to discover, in reality, we know they can't contradict because God revealed the Quran.
Yeah.
And God also created the world.
The world, yeah.
So the Quran is God's word,
Yeah.
but
They can't contradict.
the world is also God's word because God said be and it is.
Yeah.
So we know that that contradiction must be internal. It's not out there in reality. So
Something's being misunderstood somewhere.
yeah, so there's a really good example, which is a case in point, right?
Okay.
Me and you, we are sitting here,
We
but
are.
but let's go back 60 years, just 60 years.
I wasn't here.
Yeah. So imagine
Were you here?
imagine we go back
Okay.
60 years, 70 years,
Yeah.
and we're both sitting down and we're actually doing a radio show instead of this podcast. Now, at this time, the world has the scientific world has a consensus. It has a consensus on the idea that the universe is eternal, meaning the universe has no beginning and no end.
Okay.
And this is what physicists believed.
That was consensus.
That was a consensus.
So
They
yeah.
believed with certainty that the universe is eternal. This was known as the static state theory or model, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what basically happened is this. That idea completely contradicts the Quran because that idea says the universe has no beginning, and in the Quran it's clear the universe has a beginning.
Allah is the one that
Allah is the one who created the universe,
Yeah.
right? So according to that,
doesn't
the
have a
universe
beginning and
always
an end.
existed. So that's a much stronger argument against God than evolution was, because the universe has always been here, so there's no need for God. Right?
Okay.
Evolution, even evolutionists would say there was a beginning, right?
Yeah.
But with the universe, there's no beginning. Like, so the most direct you can imagine contradiction between the Quran and science is not evolution. It's actually what happened about 70 years ago,
Okay.
because there's a direct contradiction.
So then what happened?
After a few decades, we discovered that the Big Bang model makes more sense of the data because new data came, and the scientific world then changed its mind that the universe actually has a beginning.
Wow.
Now,
Just like that.
yeah, I mean, it took a long time. I mean, some of the scientists were not happy with it, and it took a long time. Especially what's interesting is the Soviet scientists,
Yeah.
the communist scientists,
Yeah.
they didn't like it because it was an idea which was giving more air to religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So they were the least likely to accept it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's a contradiction in the Quran, which later on is no longer a contradiction. Now, why did
Yeah.
this happen? Because the way science works is this. Me and you are scientists, and we're scientists, and we're trying to work out what is the color of swans. We're like, that swan's white, that swan's white, that swan's white. We've seen 500 swans.
Okay.
So we come up with the theory, all swans are
White.
white. In the future, we may discover
A
a
black
black
swan.
swan. Therefore, our previous theory, all swans are white, goes out the window.
Down the bin.
Yep.
In the bin.
So, in science, you can always have a new observation
Yeah.
which can challenge your previous theory.
And that's why science isn't reliable as something individually.
I wouldn't say not reliable. I would say that's why it's beautiful, because it can always change its conclusions.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not something which I as a scientist have made a conclusion and I'm going to stick to it forever.
I think I see where you're going here. Is where you're going, science can always be changed, and it's
Yep.
always changing based on discovery, research, etc., etc., etc. But Islam is not going to change.
Yes, but also something else which I was adding is that by looking at science,
Yeah.
we look at it has weight because of these reasons.
Okay.
We look at the Quran and it has weight because of these reasons.
Yeah.
So when we come across what looks like a contradiction, either we've misunderstood the Quran or we've misunderstood science, or actually no, those are the two possibilities. Either we misunderstood the Quran or we misunderstood science. So we need to look at it like this. The Quran has weight, and so does scientific conclusions. But the Quran as a book, we know that certain things that it says, it may contradict science today, but maybe perhaps in 100, 200, 500 years time, science will revise its conclusions and that will be more in line with the Quran.
Yeah.
It's not necessary that's going to happen in the future. And this is why it's very important that if we understand the rhetoric behind evolutionary theory at a popular level
Yeah.
and at an academic level is totally different. When it came to, say, the universe having no beginning,
Yeah.
there was a very clear, powerful reason for that according to the scientific data. Later on, we discovered it was wrong. With evolutionary theory, the way that we are taught it in schools, in textbooks, by popular writers like Richard Dawkins is, it's as true as the shape of the earth. It's as true as there's a table in front of me. But what's interesting, Musa, is when you go and look at it academically, they believe it's not as true as that. They believe it's based on a probabilistic framework and it has assumptions, and there are disputes about its core ideas.
Okay.
And these aren't within religious circles, these are within secular academic circles.
Okay.
So there's a big, and the question we need to ask is, why is there such a big difference between the public understanding and the academic understanding? So let me give you an example, right? Victor Stenger, famous militant atheist who passed away a few years ago, he said the prospect that Darwin's broad theory of natural selection is going to get changed in the future is just as likely as us finding out the earth is really flat. Like, it's never going to happen. That's the level. And he's a popular science writer, and he gave lectures and talks, and he debates, like he debated like William and Craig and other sort of famous theists. So you have this popular rhetoric from these atheists who are saying it's as true as this, it's as true as that. And at the same time, academically, they know that's not the case. In fact, Richard Dawkins, although he misrepresents Darwin's theory a lot, he himself, in a book called A Devil's Chaplain, he says this. He says, we must acknowledge that future findings may cause us to disregard Darwinism or modify it beyond recognition. So even he himself admits, in the future, new facts may come to light that we have to discard Darwinism. Now, when you have this type of admission from people who publicly they're talking about the theory like it's, I don't know, as true as the shape of the earth, you know, the question has to be asked, what's going on? Why is there so much propaganda? Why is there a big difference between the public and the academic understanding?
Interesting. This is interesting, bro. I think you blew everyone away. Like, there's a lot of information there to take in. I want to actually ask you a question as someone who studied science and stuff like that. It's a funny question, yeah? What do you think of the Flat Earth Society? Have you come across them?
Do you know there's this crazy things, like there's this thing on YouTube about a guy, he's like sending up a rocket and it goes up and up and up and up and then it hits some sort of ceiling and he's like, oh, I discovered a ceiling. Yeah, I reckon these are just my thoughts, right?
Do you think the earth is flat?
No, I don't think the earth is flat, but I really think that,
thank God for that,
we live in a world
yeah,
where it's kind of like truth doesn't matter anymore to people. It's what's popular. So everyone can come together and just say something bizarre.
That's true, man.
Yeah, and because everyone's saying it, it's like it's true.
It's true. It's like this whole Flat Earth Society, bro. You know, they're very strong now.
I know.
They're very strong, bro. Like if you go on one of their forums and you start saying otherwise,
yeah,
bro, they will slate you, man.
Not
like,
only that, bro, you have people who deny the climate change, people who deny the moon landing, you know, people at the end of the day, you know,
everyone has their own views.
Well, no, the thing about the scientific world, right, is you will not find these sort of discussions there, like flat earth and, you know, these sort of things.
What's the funniest thing you've come across, like, in all of your, like, what's the funniest, most bizarre, like, thing? When you heard this, you were like, what? Where did you come up with this from? Like, theory, or I don't know.
Okay, I found something like really, really funny, right?
Yeah.
So I was reading about, because there's a friend who helps me out a lot with Darwin's research on Darwinism and stuff.
Okay.
And he likes reading history books. He's based up in Manchester and stuff. So he sometimes sends me really funny stuff. And the funniest thing he sent me once was Darwin talking about Hurul Ain.
What?
Yeah, I know, it's really strange, right? So basically when Darwin was
wait, can you first clarify Hurul Ain for us, please?
Sorry, Hurul Ain.
How are you going to translate this? Let's see how he translates it.
Okay, wait. Okay.
Look, he's struggling, guys.
Why are you getting excited? So, hurul ain, the trigger word for Musa to get excited, but basically, the women of paradise.
I
right?
can't deny it.
The women of paradise, which are supposed to be, in the Islamic tradition, the most unspeakably amazing creation in terms of that'll attract men, right? So it's like a reward for the men in paradise, and it's the sort of thing that, if I was to, if somebody when they want to challenge Islam, they're like, you have those virgins in paradise. I mean, it's a very famous, well-known thing, yeah, that Islam has this concept of these beautiful women in paradise, right? So Darwin, when he was younger, he really was fond of some girls who were like his obviously his age. He was like a teenager at the time, or
I can't imagine Darwin as a kid, man.
Yeah. Well, he must have been at some point.
You know why? Because all the pictures you see of Darwin, like he's got a beard, he's like bald.
He's born like that. He's born like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Darwin was
Darwin
was basically because he was a Victorian, and they were well read and stuff, and they heard about Islam, and they obviously heard, the East was always seen as this crazy land of stories and Aladdin and flying carpets and beautiful women in those like niqab, that sort of thing. Yeah. So anyway, Darwin was comparing some beautiful girls that he saw in his younger years. He was comparing them in his writings to Hurul Ain.
Really? So he knew about Islam?
Yeah, I mean, he knew about Hurul Ain. I don't know if he knew about Islam, but he did actually, he did actually write about that.
That is funny.
That is really interesting, isn't it?
That is funny. That is funny. I want to put this as a clip on YouTube. I want to put this as a clip on my YouTube channel. Charles Darwin talking about Hurul Ain.
You can't make this up.
That's bizarre. Yeah, you can't make that
I actually
up.
did. That was I'm joking. I didn't make it up. Yeah, there's references for this. Yeah.
So were Charles Darwin and Charles Dickens from the same period?
I think this is a good segue to end the show. You're supposed to be studying history, bro.
I'm joking, bro. It's a joke. They're both called Charles Darwin, Dickens. It's a joke, guys. Come on.
Okay. I thought you were serious there, but I'm joking. Yeah. So how's history going?
I was kind of being serious. Like if they're from the same period, but okay. Now history's going good, man. History's going good.
I can see that.
You know what? you know what the thing with history is, yeah? When you study history, people automatically think or expect you to know all of history, but they don't understand. Like you do it in phases.
Like me asking you about World War, what happened in 1920s, and then you claim World War II took place. I was like, what? Anyway,
you know what it is, yeah? For example, now. Before the show, Subboor asked me about World War II and when it happened. I know it's a big event. I know.
No, I asked you what happened in 1927.
Yeah, and I said World War II.
Yeah,
it was just a guess. I know World War I happened in 1914. Yeah,
well, you want a Blue Peter badge?
I know it happened in 1914. Look, in my defense, okay, bro. I just started studying history, and also, come on, bro. You're embarrassing me now. Imagine me in 5 years. I'm a big let's say I'm a big historian. And then someone pulls this clip out. This guy didn't even know when World War II was. This guy's a joke.
No, but your answer is actually good, which is that people study niches,
different,
and you're studying like Greco-Roman and
I'm studying like Roman history, Greek history, and medieval history. So I'm not at the early modern period.
Were people evil back then?
Where?
You said
medieval. Romans have some really interesting stuff about them. Romans have some really, really interesting stuff. Like for example, now, did you know that Romans? People correlate Greeks and Romans.
Yeah.
Have you ever come across that?
Yeah.
They're not the same at all.
The Romans conquered them, yeah.
Yeah, when the Romans came from Rome and around Italy, when they went to Greece, the Greeks hated them.
Yeah.
The Greeks absolutely hated them.
There's a story about this guy, Archimedes or something. He's doing something at the beach. Because they were really intelligent. The Romans were like brutes.
Yeah,
something like this.
The Romans were heavily inspired by the Greeks. Heavily inspired.
After conquering them. It's like...
kind of
like Islam and Persia.
Yeah. So the one thing the Romans would do is, that was different, is when they would go into an area, they would see, is it urban? or is it like suburban? Is it like marshland? If it was marshland, what they would do is they would bring their own culture there. But one thing they like doing is when they would conquer areas, they would adopt the area's culture if it already had a culture. So for example, when the Romans went, Julius Caesar, he went to Gaul, which is I think near France. So it's France. Yeah. It's France, basically France. And I know because when you're studying it, they don't actually tell you this is France. They tell you it from the term it was known as back then. You get, so he went to Gaul, and like they do it like that. So he went to Gaul, and from Gaul he literally saw Dover. Julius Caesar.
No way.
He saw Dover, bro. It's 65 kilometers.
He said, nah.
So he saw Dover. No, he was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. So they got the boats. They went. They're going to Dover. They're making their way. They get to Dover. He gets kicked out. He's like, you know what? It's not even that he got kicked out. It was he didn't want to go further. And the Romans, there's even reports of Roman soldiers really, really disliking UK as a whole. They were not used to the foggy weather. They're coming from Italy. They weren't used to the foggy weather, cold weather. They hated it. When they got to Gaul, an example I wanted to give you of them taking cultures over is they never... have you ever seen Romans being depicted as wearing trousers?
No, they're wearing this metal...
Toga. It's
yeah.
Yeah. So what they would wear is called a toga. So it's like what you...
I can imagine you get very cold in that.
So when they got to Gaul, bro, they were like, this is not working. This is not working. We can't wear this kicking around. We're going to freeze, yeah? So they started incorporating... They started wearing the toga with... kind of like a shalwar type thing, like a 3/4 shalwar is like what we wear as Asians and Arabs. They wear it like underneath some of their garments. So it's like a 3/4. Let's say 3/4.
Yeah, which looks like a parachute thing.
Yeah, well,
it's quite baggy.
Yeah, it's baggy. But with this, they started incorporating that into their dress.
No way.
When they went Greece, bro, and I'm giving like a long lecture, but when they went Greece, one of the things that they done is they loved Greek culture. They loved it, from the inscriptions to the way the people were, and the Greeks hate them. That's the thing. So what they started doing is they incorporated Greek culture within Roman culture. So, for example, the first emperor of Rome was Augustus. And that's where like the month August comes from. July comes from Julius Caesar. They got all of this stuff going on. Augustus, actually, before he became emperor of Rome, he was called Octavian. So when he became emperor, they called him... Augustus. So Augustus now, one of the things that he done is he built like an altar. This is like going really, there's a lot of context. So the Greeks would use altars to sacrifice on top of. So they would climb up and they would sacrifice for their gods, you know, animals and stuff like that. So when Augustus built his altar, it was called Arapakis. That's what it was called, Arapakis, yeah. He built it in the style of the Greeks, sorry. So like they had this strong influence of Greeks. There's even depictions of Romans holding like olive branches and stuff. So they loved that sort of stuff. That's why even me, baiting myself out a little bit more on my lack of knowledge before studying the topic, bro, I thought Greek and Roman is the same thing.
Yeah. I think that's a very common misconception.
Yeah. When I went into the class, they're like, oh yeah, they didn't even clarify it. So I was like, oh wow. I realized it like after some time. I was like, these people are different, completely different. The Greeks were one thing, Romans were another. But yeah, man. Bro, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you, man.
After the show, I'm going to tell you the name of the woman that Darwin was describing as Hur Alain. So I'm just waiting for that.
Oh, there's a name of a woman?
Yeah.
Has she got like a Muslim name?
No, but I'll tell you after the show.
Okay.
That's just a prize to help you wrap up the show quickly.
Okay, no problem. Bro, Jazakallah khairan for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We spoke about different topics. Alhamdulillah, evolution, all of that sort of stuff. Drowning. This was a bit of a different one because you actually really went in depth on a subject, and I think it will benefit a lot of people with science, with the knowledge of science and evolution and stuff like that. So bro, Jazakallah khairan for coming on. Brothers and sisters, this has been Rerooted. I really hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any suggestions for us, for any topics you'd like us to discuss in the future, any guests you'd like us to get on the show, make sure you comment them down below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, iERA, and we will see you very, very shortly. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace.
Her name was. I wanted to put that on the show.